I told you earlier this week what the result would be of Donald Trump walking away, tearing up, kicking over the tables of the patiently negotiated nuclear deal between the permanent five on the Security Council of the United Nations plus Germany. I told you that the consequence could only be war. And as I pointed out to Sarah Khan earlier, and I should do so again to you because there's a lot of people don't yet quite grasp this. All the words from Boris Johnson, President Macron and Angela Merkel are meaningless when they say that they are staying in the deal, because the only party that really matters to the nuclear deal with Iran is the United States of America, because the United States insists on the extraterritoriality of its law. What does that mean in plain English? It means this: if you continue to invest in or trade with Iran, you too will be sanctioned by the United States of America. And if you have a bank account, you better bid it goodbye, because your bank account will very swiftly thereafter be frozen and then closed. It means that any company in any country in the world that buys as much as a mulberry, and Iranian mulberries are very good, by the way, from Iran will thenceforth not just be banned from trading in the United States, but will be sued by the United States for breaking United States sanctions against Iran. You really couldn't make up that reach of extraterritorial legal boast. It's a boast, but it's not a hollow boast. It's a meaningful one, as many companies that have tried to do business with Cuba have over the years already felt the hot breath of American justice on the back of their neck. So, within the next 90 days, the Iran nuclear deal will collapse. When it collapses, Iran obviously will immediately begin enriching uranium in order to do what it forswore not to do as long as there was a deal with the West in place. Now there's no longer a deal. Why would Iran not develop its nuclear energy plants to the maximum scientific capacity? What happens then? Israel attacks Iran and tries to destroy its nuclear facilities. What happens then? Iran attacks Israel back and attacks its own neighbors in the Persian Gulf, who are openly, brazenly, in a kind of cross-dressing, transgender kind of festival. You've got Saudi Arabia now openly allied with Netanyahu's Israel against Iran. So, from the Iranian point of view, Saudi Arabia, the so-called United Arab Emirates, and other satrapies in the Persian Gulf are then legitimate targets for Iranian guns and rockets. And, of course, Iran is present in Syria, not in significant numbers, but in symbolically important numbers. And because they are co-religionists with Iraq, the majority in Iraq are Shiite, the majority in Iran are Shiite, the majority in Lebanon are Shiite. Well, you get the drift that I'm on here. You have war throughout the crescent surrounding Israel, Palestine. And then you've got a real serious danger of the United States and Russia becoming involved. So the dogs of war, which were unleashed yesterday and claimed their first casualties last night, are not going to be put back into their kennel any time soon. And there's another Arab story in town. Abdul Hakim Belhaj is a man known to me. I've sat with him. He was in my Tony Blair film, which you might have seen. Abdul Hakim Belhaj and his wife Fatima were kidnapped by British intelligence, handed over to American intelligence, who handed them over on our behalf to Colonel Gaddafi and introduced to his torture tables. Belhaj was tortured on those tables in Abu Salim prison in Gaddafi's Libya for 7, just imagine that, 7 long years of torture. His 5 months pregnant wife was hanged up by her wrists from a wall and tortured, pregnant, a woman, a mother, and we were up to our necks in it. And according to Belhaj, during the torture sessions that he endured, British intelligence agents were present in the torture chamber. Now, we'll never know the names of those. We'll never know the exact veracity of those latter claims, because the British government just settled out of court today with an unprecedented apology by the Prime Minister herself in a personal letter of apology to Mr. Belhaj and his wife Fatima. Belhaj never wanted money. If he had, he could have had an offer, I'm ready to tell you, though I probably shouldn't, of £2.7 million to drop this case. But Belhaj was suing for £1 single pound. That's all he wanted, £1, plus an acknowledgement that the British government and its intelligence agencies were guilty, as he charged them, of kidnapping him and his wife and delivering them to Gaddafi's torture chamber. He got his pound, he got his public apology from the Prime Minister, and he got his statement in the House of Commons today, which Mrs. Belhaj was able to witness from the gallery in the form of a statement reading out the Prime Minister's letter by Britain's Attorney General. He got his pound, and Mrs. Belhaj got £500,000 in compensation for her ordeal. But much more important is this: it wasn't Theresa May that committed this crime. It wasn't our Attorney General today that sanctioned it. It wasn't Boris Johnson that facilitated it. This crime was committed by Tony Blair's government. This crime was committed by Tony Blair's chief of the intelligence community. This crime was committed under Jack Straw's foreign secretaryship. So if anybody should have been at the bar of the House of Commons today, on their knees begging forgiveness of Mr. Belhaj and his wife, it should not have been Theresa May. It should have been Tony Blair. The Attorney General made the point in his statement that Tony Blair had been informed of what the British government had decided to do. And they didn't decide to do it out of the goodness of their heart. They did it to save Jack Straw and Tony Blair's skin, to save them from having to go into court and potentially perjure themselves, or if they told the truth, potentially be convicted of the gravest possible crime. And they had a setback in the High Court just last week or the week before, when the High Court required the British state to divulge to Belhaj's lawyers evidence and material which would have been very damaging indeed for the British state and its former rulers, Blair and Straw. We'll be talking about both these issues, which could, of course, rage not just for the next 3 hours, but for many hours longer than that. And who knows what tonight's darkness in Damascus and in the occupied Golan Heights will bring. But if we have time, we want to talk about the situation in Lewisham East, where, unless it happens in the next minutes, hours, before I speak about it, we're still able to discuss who's going to be the candidate for Labour in one of Labour's safest seats. There's a row broken out, isn't there, always, between the moderates and the small m militants of Momentum over who the candidate should be. Both sides cynically use all-women shortlists, all black and minority ethnic shortlists when it suits them. The right wing, the Blairite wing of Labour, is normally wholly in favour of all women shortlists and all BAME shortlists. But in Lewisham East, they're not, because their candidate is Harriet Harman's son, who's a man called Joe Dromey. On the other hand, Corbyn's candidates are all women and all women of colour. And therefore, it looks like the Labour executive is going to impose an all-women, all-minority ethnic shortlist. I don't have a dog in that fight. I don't have a candidate in that fight. I smile wryly at the cynicism and hypocrisy on both sides, having myself been partially a victim of these kind of shenanigans. But one thing is clear. The departure of Heidi Alexander to a place of exile in City Hall at the right hand of Mayor Sadiq Khan means more than a job looking after London transport. Heidi Alexander is a Blairite personified, as is Mayor Sadiq Khan. And what is clearly being established on the river in City Hall is a Labour Party in exile, a Labour leadership in exile, waiting for the call to come back across the water, or perhaps, just perhaps, to set up an entirely new Labour Party altogether.